What's up everybody, Jeff here, and we're back for some more Rule of Cool. This time we're talking about the Bayou. So if you're not familiar, in this series I take you through a particular faction and go over each one of the masters as well as their crews to give you a little taste of their background, their flavor, and then Doug from the Danger Planet is going to talk a little bit about how they play in the game. And the idea is that if you're a new player or you're brand new to a faction, then this video should help you pick out which master and which crew will appeal most to you. We've already covered the Arcanists and the 10 Thunders in this series, so if you haven't seen those yet, then check out my playlist called Getting Started with Malifaux, and you can see that, as well as the faction overview if you haven't picked out a faction yet. If you find this video helpful, then don't forget to give it a like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one, and consider sharing around with folks who you think might find it interesting, especially if they're new to the game and they're still having trouble picking out a master. Also, be sure to check out the links in the description below. You can find a link to the Discord where you can come hang out with me and the rest of the community. Consider supporting the channel on Patreon if you like what I'm doing here. And if you do decide which crew you want to play and you're going to pick one of them up, then consider using my weird affiliate link where you can actually support the channel just by making purchases on their web store through my link. Alright, and now let's do it. One of the things that gremlins are known for is their fondness for raising pigs. And when it comes to raising pigs, Ulix Turner is the expert. He seems to understand the creatures better than anyone else, and gremlins come from all over the Bayou to get his advice on the subject. He's easy to underestimate, but Ulix has one of the sharpest wits in all the Bayou, something that he likes to call swamp smarts. Though Ulix is fairly reclusive, he's known for being fairly protective of the gremlins in his area. He tends to stay out of gremlin politics, as well as their conflicts with the city folks. But he has started raising bigger, tougher, and meaner hogs, which he provides to the other gremlin families to fight for the cause. Well, like you just heard, if you like pigs, then Ulix is your man. He's a really fun character in the lore, because he kind of just likes to keep to himself and raise his pigs and hang out with his dog Penelope, which I feel like is something that a lot of us can identify with. But the models in the rest of his crew are some of the most unique that you'll see in the whole Malifaux line. There's big pigs and small pigs, and pigs that use frying pans as armor. There's even hybrid gremlin pigs. Oh, and then of course there's Penelope, who is one of my favorite dogs of all the Malifaux dogs. She's the best girl. But with that, let's go over to Doug so he can tell us a little bit more about how Ulix plays on the table.
Ulix Turner is the Sui keyword. The first version of Ulix is probably a bit more of just a pure summoner. He's doing a ton of summoning. He's the Bayou faction's out and out, like, pure summoner. And he's basically summoning pigs, all of these different types of pigs. He has a lot of different styles of pigs that he can summon for different types of things. But generally, the one you really want to look out for are the swine cursed and the war pigs. Those can be really, really dangerous. The downside to the pigs is that they don't have a great melee range, but you can buff that. And he has a couple of models that will run around and work with and buff the keys within his Sui keyword. And that's Ulix Turner, or Ulix 1, is really just more of that pure caster. His other version, Ulix Turner Pork Belly Protector, does a bit more damage, I would say, and is also a bit faster. He's actually riding a pig in this variant, and he takes on the pig keyword as well. So he himself can take the buffs from those support models, and he's less of a full-time summoner in this mode. He has incidental summoning in the terms of upgrading things from his fast action, and you're usually using that to turn smaller pigs into said swine cursed or said war pigs, effectively. So you're usually kind of like growing them up rather than purely generating them in mass like you would be in Ulix 1. Ulix 2 is still a bit of an upgrade machine in terms of upgrading the piggies, but he's doing a lot of the work himself also from a DPS and from a movement and damage perspective.
If there's anything that the gremlins are known for, more so than their love of pigs, it's their love of shine. The gremlins' own particular kind of alcohol. It's known to be so strong that most humans can't tolerate it. And to gremlins, most human alcohol tastes like water. Because of this aspect of their culture, the Brewmaster has become something of a religious icon, due to his monk-like ability to create incredible shine. He's one of the few gremlins who can command the respect of almost all of the other gremlins, but unbeknownst to the rest of them, he was actually a double agent who was born and raised to serve the 10 Thunders. The crime syndicate intended to use him to control the rest of the gremlins to do their bidding, but their plan backfired horribly. Brewmaster took some 10 Thunders weapons that he was supposed to be using to stir unrest, and instead turned them over to gremlins who would use them against the Thunders themselves. The 10 Thunders haven't forgotten this betrayal, but so far the Brewmaster has managed to stay one step ahead. Brewmaster and his crew are really fun because they all focus around this theme of using alcohol to their advantage. They can drink it themselves to give themselves extra powers, fighting with drunken kung fu, or they can give it to their enemies to debuff them and poison them. Most of the models either feature cups or whiskey barrels, and there are even whiskey golem and gaiman, which are mechanical constructs made almost entirely out of alcohol barrels, though no one can really explain how they work. But now let's go over to Doug so he can tell us a little bit more about how Brewmaster plays in game.
So the Brewmaster is an interesting master within the Bayou. He works around the poison condition. He's got two different variants, but both of the variants care a lot about stacking poison, either on yourself or on enemies. And a lot of models within the Brewmaster's crew have the ability to reduce the damage that they suffer from poison to 0. So they're using it for proccing abilities. He's got a pretty strong lure with some good triggers on it, as well as a fast action that can do damage based on the poison that you have, and he has a lot of different types of movement abilities. The Brewmaster 2, Brewmaster Moonshiner, has, again, he still works with poison, like the rest of his crew does, but he's got a lot of interesting repositioning and aura scenarios going on. Specifically, Lasting Liquor and Tipsy Slide are both very powerful 8-inch auras that are abilities that are on the front of his card. And then if you look on the back of his card, he can do a bunch of interesting stuff with his fast action, which is Open the Gourd. He targets a non-hazardous model or a friendly tri-tree construct, which is effectively his beer golems or his little mini beer golems that he has running around. And then he can make the area within it hazardous. So it's a good trick where you throw a beer golem up the board and then you open the gourd on it and make it hazardous and annoying to deal with. So that's the Brewmaster. He's playing around with poison, both offensively and defensively, and he's got a bunch of very interesting synergies, both targeting themselves and enemy models.
The gremlins have earned a reputation among the humans for being bandits and thieves. Ma Tucket and her family are very proud of this reputation, and they engage in such behaviors just for the fun of it. They hijack guild shipments and terrorize settlers, causing Ma herself to have a significant bounty on her head. Among the gremlins, the females tend to be much more intelligent, and Ma is no exception. She uses her intellect and her cunning to get what she wants, and unlike most of the gremlins, she has big plans for the Bayou. In spite of her long-standing rivalry with Som'er Teeth Jones, she voted for his son Lenny for the democracy, a plan that no one except for Ma herself seems to understand. Ma Tucket and her crew are really funny. She's this little old lady who carries around a giant spoon and beats people with it, and one of her daughters is like a mini version of her, with a tiny spoon. Her crew is kind of interesting and unique among the gremlins, because many of them actually have mechanical augments, or are entirely mechanical, due to the fact that Sparks and some of the other gremlins have actually interacted with the Miners and Steamfitters Union, and learned a little bit about constructs. You've also got Big Brain Bryn, who is a super smart gremlin, but that makes him kind of an outcast among the other gremlins. But he does experiments on animals in the Bayou, fusing them with machines in a supervillainy way to try to create the perfect minion. Oh, and then there's Trixie Belle. We're not going to talk about Trixie Belle. But with that, let's go back to Doug, who's going to tell us a little bit more about how Ma plays.
Another personal favorite of mine. I've played a lot of Ma Tucket at this point. She's great. She is a control master, just like a lot of the other biomasters are control masters, except Ma derives her power specifically from the ridiculous amount of triggers that she has on her card. Almost more than any other model I've seen in Malifaux, learning and understanding how to manage triggers is going to really, really pay off when you're looking at Ma Tucket. She has Ill Omens, which just flatly increases her crew's initiative value by 1. She has Diving Charge, which is just great. It lets a model that can declare charge actions while they're engaged, and it ignores terrain while moving and can move through other models, which is just crazy. Her other thing that she does, like kind of as a keyword, is Pit Traps. Pit Traps are 50mm destructible, severe, hazardous, damage 1, injured 1 markers, and she just throws them all over the battlefield and can lure you into them, can drop you into them, and can just generally find ways to ping ball you around her pit traps to ping both damage and injured, which can really, really quickly just kill crews, basically. And then she has a giant wooden spoon that's a min 3 attack with a crit strike or a severe injury trigger or a knock-aside trigger. So she's just really solid all the way around. Ma 2 is a bit different in terms of what she's trying to do from a playstyle perspective. She still works very similarly in that she cares a lot about pit traps, but this Ma is on a giant mecha arachnid, and she's armor 2, she's all-terrain, which means that she can move through severe and hazardous terrain and ignores models and vertical distances while moving. And then she has an ability called Heaps of Trash that lets friendly Trixie models within Aura 12 choose to be unaffected by hazardous terrain. She also has Scamper. After an enemy model within 6 cheats Fate, this model may push up to 2 in any direction. After resolving the current ability, Scamper is something you're going to see across a lot of her keyword. just like the ability to interact with and or create pit traps is something you'll see across her keyword. And then on the back of her card, in terms of what she's got going on, she's got a 2-inch stat 6 attack that's a 2/4/5 that can punch through armor. But most importantly, it has a master trigger called Drop Down the Hole, which allows you to place the target into base contact with a friendly scheme marker or friendly pit trap marker within 6 of its current position. So you can just like throw something at a pit trap, which is pretty cool. It's kind of like a little mini kidnap. And then another Gremlin's Trash, which is once per turn, target a scrap marker. Enemy models within 2 of the target must pass a TN13 duel or gain this model's choice of either staggered or stunned, which I've used to really good effect. And then it has Junkyard Treasure, which just says friendly Trixie models within 2 of the target can gain focused. So early game, that's really, really efficient for spreading out a ton of focus onto your guys. That's kind of how I use them, but Mawtucket is great. I'm a huge, huge fan of her. I'd say her and the Anglers are probably my 2 favorite keywords in the Bayou right now. So you should check them out if you're into it.
The gremlin's entire culture is based on observing and copying humans, and in no gremlin is that more obvious than Ophelia LaCroix. She's unusually intelligent for a gremlin, and her territory being on the edge of the bayou caused her to come into contact with the Ortegas. She quickly identified the leader of the Ortegas, Perdita, and began emulating the woman, which led to the rest of her family doing the same with the rest of the Ortegas. But her legend didn't truly begin until she successfully stole Perdita's hat. Unfortunately, the red cage pit is also in Ophelia's territory, and the constant stream of abominations pouring out of it has caused no end of problems for the family. They're constantly struggling to resupply, and they always have to be on guard, or else the abominations might be able to overrun the whole bayou. Ophelia and her crew are really fun because they're kind of like the cowboys of the bayou. Perdita and the family keyword are all these kind of Mexican gunslingers, and almost every model in Ophelia's crew is a gremlinized copy of Perdita and her crew. You've got the sword fighter, the sniper, the gunman, the explosives expert, and even the crazy old relative. But honestly, I think Ophelia is the most interesting part of the whole crew. There's something about a smart gremlin that just always makes me laugh. But with that, let's go back over to Doug, so he can tell us a little bit more about how Ophelia and the kin keyword play.
Ophelia LaCroix, or the kin keyword, is a pretty shooty keyword. Ophelia herself, in her original version, has a custom firearm with a bunch of really good triggers on it, and she has a fast action that can also shoot. And her keyword is kind of a riff on the family keyword from Perdita Ortega. They all have a couple of interesting things going on. They have flinch kind of across the keyword, which is when an enemy model targets this model with an attack action, if the action stat is higher than this model's resist stat, then this model gains shielded. I also have the bigger they are, this model receives +1 to opposed duels with enemy models that have a size greater than this model, which is basically going to be every model out there because everything in her crew is size 1. It's pretty interesting. Ophelia 2 tends to be a bit more of an upgrade master, and then she gives out the upgrades to the folks on her team effectively. And she can give out this toolbox of all these different types of guns that do all these different types of effects. And then in addition to that, she has a couple of other good abilities on her card. She has target practice, which lets her at distance pick off scheme markers, which is really good. And then she just has custom firearm, which is again another ranged DPS attack. It's pretty decent. She can stagger from a distance, or she can get a trigger that even attaches an upgrade to that model. So she's all about getting out gun upgrades and attaching arsenal upgrades to both herself and to the other folks in her crew.
The epitome of a gremlin, Som'er Teeth Jones is crass, violent, and misogynistic. But the man was instrumental in forming gremlin culture, as he was one of the first to observe the humans and bring back such practices as distilling moonshine and using big hats to signify your rank and authority. Even his name is the stuff of legends, and so when the gremlins decided to vote for a leader, Som'er figured he was a shoo-in. But many of the other prominent families expressed their lack of support for his candidacy, and so a plan was put in place, resulting in his son Lenny being elected Gremlin General. Som'er now insists that his son is the leader, but everyone knows who's actually calling the shots. Now, there's a lot that could be said about Som'er and his crew, but I think I know somebody else who might have some thoughts on the subject. Maeve, why don't you tell us what you think?
Hi, it's Maeve from Boring Conversation in the Bayou Breakdown podcast. And if it's a Bayou episode, you know I'm going to be here. So the crew I really want to talk about today is one that I feel is the epitome of everything the Bayou is. And you know I've got to be talking about Som'er Teeth Jones. First of all, this guy is just ridiculous. Everything about him is scheming, conniving, and probably more than a little bit two-faced. After all, he does have the biggest hat, and in the Bayou, the biggest hat rules the day. His models are a complete slice of life of the Bayou, ranging from Lenny, who the gremlins all voted to be their leader in what they called the demo crazy, to gremlin chefs running around with big roast pig, just giving the crew healing from eating it, and gremlin criers screaming orders at other gremlins. That sort of bonkers, off the wall energy is what makes Som'er and his Big Hat crew really stand out for me. But I also really love how he plays. The Big Hat crew is one you will feel drawn to if you like two things. One, you like complex crews and versatile play styles that let you react to your opponent in sort of like a silver bullet style. And two, if you like blowing up your own guys for fun and profit. Som'er is a summoner who drops in Bayou Gremlins and other Big Hat models to do the things he needs them to do. Sometimes it's shooting at other things, and sometimes it's getting shot at. Either path allows you to profit, as every one of Big Hat minions has some sort of effect when they die. Big Hat plays a lot like a puzzle where you have to figure out the best models to either score your schemes or become expendable at the correct moment for fun and profit. Plus, the keyword is jam-packed with models and all of them are full of flavor, even if that flavor is probably just high-octane moonshine and gunpowder. So if those kind of things interest you, Som'er is definitely the best place to start in the Bayou.
Thanks so much, Maeve. Don't forget to catch Maeve on the Bayou Breakdown and Boring Conversation, both excellent Malifaux podcasts. But with that, let's go back over to Doug, who's going to tell us a little bit more about Som'er's rules.
Summerteeth Jones is one of the biggest, baddest bosses in the Bayou. He has a Big Hat keyword. And Som'er really focuses on summoning. Similar to Ulix, in that he tends to, be the other summoner in the Bayou, except he's summoning and going a bit wider in terms of summoning more smaller things. And then he has a couple of hireable muscle models that he can bring in either Lenny or a couple of other guys that can do big damage and kind of support the little swarm that he's making. One of his big things is mosquitoes as well. And then Summertooth Jones 2 also can do summoning and has utility and support. Neither of these guys are really huge damage dealers. They're mostly operating in the support, summoning, board control space of the game.
Zoraida is a woman of mystery. She was once a human who came through the breach long ago and eventually formed an alliance with the Neverborn. She occupies a hut in the bayou where she sees and shapes fate, laying down intricate plans to try to resist the return of the tyrants. Most humans from the city know her as the Swamp Hag, who desperate people seek out to try to turn around their bad fortunes. Most of those people don't ever make it home. Most residents of the bayou don't take kindly to the humans coming into their space, but few of them are willing to stand up to the powerful witch, opting to give her a wide berth. Zoraida has long desired to unite the gremlin families, understanding that their infighting only weakens the bayou, and that together they could be a formidable force. But this is a difficult objective, considering the violent culture of the gremlins and the long-standing rivalry between the different clans. Only recently have they made any progress towards this goal, though when Zoraida tried to oversee the process of electing a gremlin leader, the gremlins turned her away. Zoraida is for sure one of the more popular characters in Malifaux. She plays off the whole swamp hag, voodoo witch trope, and she kind of lives in this in-between space where she's a human, but she works with the Neverborn, and she's kind of allied with the Bayou as well. Now, there's been a ton of different models for Zoraida herself over the years, but for sure the most interesting stuff is everything that comes in her crew. The Swamp Fiend keyword is really big, and it consists of all manner of strange creatures that you might find in the Bayou in Malifaux. You've got Silurids, which are these frog-like carnivores, as well as their juvenile form and their spawn mother form. You've got Bayou Gators, Bad Juju, which is like this swamp golem. You've got the Grootslang, which is a creature from South African mythology, as well as the Adzi, which comes from West African mythology. You got walking trees. There's all kinds of really cool stuff. And this crew in particular is a ton of fun to paint. So if you're interested in a unique hobby project, this is a great choice. But with that, let's go over to Doug, and he's going to tell us a little bit more about how Zoraida plays.
Zoraida, or the Swamp Fiend keyword in general, is a very large keyword. It actually contains a lot of models in it. It's a dual faction master, so she can either be played as Neverborn or as Bayou. The biggest deal that she does is she's a control obey master, and the most specifically powerful thing that's on her card is the ensorcel trigger that's on her obey. It's a little interesting in that the ensorcel trigger requires you to have 2 masks to go off, but what it does is it gives you a double obey, which is really, really, really interesting. She also has a totem that can curse enemies. It's a really, really interesting play mechanic and a play loop, which I have not seen really on that many other types of models in Malifaux. So I really enjoy doing that. And then Eyes in the Night, which is also a pretty interesting ability, says that this model can draw line of sight and range for its non-melee action from friendly swamp scenes within 12 and enemy models with voodoo upgrade attachments. So she can stand in the back line really, really far away from any type of danger and just be a very interesting support and control master. And then she has her other variant, which is Zoraida the Swamp Hag. Also a control master, a bit more interesting. She's got a Bumps and Boils ranged attack that gives out stunned really, really efficiently. She's got Off the Path, which is one of my favorite abilities from Jezda 2. A couple of ES models have this. It basically says it discard 2 cards. For each card discarded, you can draw a card and move the model either 2, 3, or 4 based on the value of the card. So effectively, if you want, you can just trash really bad cards out of your hand to try to cycle through while also getting movement out of it. And then she also has a trigger on that to drop scheme markers in base contact with the target of it. And then she also has Moth Swarm, which is until end of phase, any models treat the area within 2 of the target as concealing, which is really good. And then playing more with kind of interesting, powerful utility abilities, she has Lost Knowledge with an incredibly powerful trigger on it for Lost Effigy, which is a once per turn trigger. And it says name a puppet of cost 4 or less, of which there's a lot that are useful in this game. Then says when resolving, instead of drawing cards, summon the named model anywhere within 2. So basically you have to target a marker to shoot it off with Lost Knowledge. And instead of getting those 2 cards, you effectively are getting either a 3 or 4 cost minion for free, which is pretty good. She also has Nefarious Pact, which is just raw card advantage. And then the other thing that's really worth mentioning here is Moth Witch. It says once per turn, when this model takes a non-charge action, it can discard up to 2 cards to have an equal number of friendly Swamp Fiends in play take the same action, which can be interacting, it can be moving, it can be focusing. It's just really efficient. So she's a support master also, but in a little bit of a different way, whereas I would say the first one is more of an obey master. This one is a lot more of a utility support master.
Long ago, Captain Zipp got his hands on an Aethervox and spent his time listening to stories of grand adventure. Since then, he's fancied himself a pirate, and he began his career robbing caravans, but he knew that he was destined for greatness. Soon after, he took his band of gremlin bandits, known as the Iron Skeeters, and stole a guild airship, which he renamed the Infamy. Now, the Iron Skeeters are the terrors of the skies, and Zipp takes every opportunity to deliver a proper monologue, so that the victims he robs will help spread his reputation. Then one day, Zipp bumped into one of his idols, Parker Barrows, and their 2 respective crews were fast friends. The 2 decided to set out on their most daring heist yet, to steal the hanging tree right out from under the guild's nose. Zipp is one of my favorite characters in the whole Bayou. He's kind of like a cartoon villain. He's all about showboating and making sure that he spreads his reputation as a ruthless villain, hence the keyword infamous. Him and his crew have all sorts of flashy technology, including jetpacks, lightning guns, and iron skeeters. So it's probably no wonder that he's also teamed up with Mancha Roja and a bunch of wrestlers. They probably appreciated his over-the-top antics and his love for a monologue. But now again, let's go over to Doug, and he's going to tell us a little bit more about how you play Zipp in game.
Oh, Captain Zipp, greatest sky goblin pirate of all time. Zipp is awesome. He has 2 modes. In his first mode, he's really fast. He moves 8. He's got a chatty aura, which is just a 6-inch aura that says that models have to discard a card to take interact actions around him. He's got a lot of really, really interesting abilities, mostly around displacement and creating terrain on the board. His big thing is that he can throw these really annoying 40mm height 3 blocking destructible pianos everywhere. So effectively, he drops pianos out of his skyship onto his enemies. And then on top of that, he's got a really strong ray gun that both ignores cover and concealment and can do really solid blast damage if your opponent decides to bunch up. And then the last big trick that I always love using with Zipp is he has Up We Go, so he himself can do really, really, really interesting kidnaps. I have personally seen Sam kidnap Ivan from 15 inches away, dump him off into his deployment zone, and have Macharoa beat Ivan to death with this at a tournament. It is very, very possible to do in a practical competitive game, and the Zipp kidnap is very, very real. Basically, you're chaining Up We Go attacks together with the mask triggers to consistently push the model wherever you want it. The other version of Zipp is Zipp as a dread pirate. So he's not really dropping pianos much anymore. He still flies. He's got a little bit of a different loadout. Now he can do a can't fire the cannons trick, which is damaging shockwaves, and you can reduce the value of the shockwave to increase the damage. He can do some interesting stuff with his cutlass or his attack, which allows him to do a capstans challenge, which is until the end phase, enemy models other than the model that he's targeting with his sword suffer a neg flip to actions targeting him. So he has like a weird defensive scenario going on. One of the other things that I should mention is innate to the infamous keyword is showboating. Showboating is when you cheat, you get to draw a card at the end of the model's activation. So a big thing with these guys is cheating down if you know that you're not going to hit a TN or win a duel anyway, just so that you can replace the card and get another card out of it. And then Zipp also has some of my favorite models in his keyword. He's got the first mate, which is a Sillurid with a giant anchor, and he's got Mancha Roja, who's this giant wrestler, this roided up goblin wrestler who's there to just crongle people over the head with other goblin wrestlers. He's pretty cool.
Wong is an unusual character even among the gremlins. Long ago, he robbed a 10 Thunders caravan and acquired magical implements, as well as a new wardrobe. Over time, Wong has learned to use those magical implements, becoming not only an entertaining showman, but a powerful mage in his own right. But the most unusual of his possessions is the 3-demon bag, a seemingly mundane object, but it speaks to him and gives him commands. The voices convinced Wong to seek out Kythera, a dangerous and mysterious place, and then tried to teach him to perform some sort of ritual. Wong got bored and sat around for a while, and told them that the ritual had failed. This angered the voices, who told him to seek out a summoner who could perform the ritual better. So Wong decided to find someone else who he could pawn the bag off on, who might have a little more patience for the incessant nagging. Intending to head back home, he made a wrong turn and ended up in the Red Cage Pit, the site of a cataclysm, which is now infested by hybrid mechanical and undead creatures. Wong is definitely one of the goofier characters in the Bayou. His whole thing is that he's kind of a parody of a stage magician, except of course that he actually can do magic. The models in his crew have a ton of character. You've got things like the lightning bugs, which definitely give you the sense that their stage performance is probably super dangerous. And then you've got the swine curse, which are actually creatures that Wong created by hybridizing pigs and gremlins together, which just sounds like a terrible idea. And then there's the pigapult, which is a catapult that shoots pigs, because of course it is. Altogether, the crew is really over the top and fun, but with that, let's go back over to Doug, who's going to tell you more about Wong and how he plays on the table.
So Wong is the whiz-bang keyword. There's a mechanic within the whiz-bang, which is effectively damaging yourself for value. And also there's a sub-theme of shockwaves and explosions that Wong deals with. He's a really fun master to play on the board, but you have to be really careful with Wong because inherently the way that he's getting value out of himself and the models in his crew is by damaging them. So if you do it too much and you put the models into an area where they can be exposed, your opponent can take advantage of that and start to pick you off of the board. But if you can do it correctly, he can do some really, really cool stuff. His fast action on original Wang, which is the glow, allows you to discard any number of glowing tokens from models within range, and then he draws cards for every 2 glowy tokens discarded by the action, and then every model within range gains a glowy token. So it's like a value engine that he can get cards out of, and the models that have the glowy tokens on them can get effects off of them, and then they flush them, and they can get them back. So you're always walking kind of the wire with Wong, and will you or won't you kind of damage yourself to get value and get ahead without having your own crew dissolve in front of your own eyes.
The Clampets are a family of gremlins who live near the ocean shore of the bayou. They used to spend their time fishing, trying to add a little bit of variety to the gremlin diet. But more recently, horrors from the depths have been creeping up out of the ocean and trying to make their way into the bayou. Luckily, the Clampets aren't only armed with fishing poles. After all, spears and dynamite are also good for fishing. Little do they know, they're the only thing standing against an invasion of the gibbering hordes that would surely devastate the rest of the bayou. But they don't much mind. Sitting around fishing was getting boring. Going to war with aquatic monsters is a refreshing change of pace. The Clampets are the newest addition to the bayou, so we don't know much about them as characters. But what we do know is that they have some of the coolest looking models in all the bayou. You got buckaroos, who are gremlins riding different kinds of aquatic creatures, skulker skins who wear the carcass of gibbering hordes monsters on their backs, hermits, it's like a gremlin hermit crab, you get it? And then there's Cervantes, who is an old man who's jousting on a snail. 10 out of 10, best model in the crew. And then there's Auntie Mel, who's basically Ahab from Moby Dick. Super cool looking crew, and hopefully we're going to learn a lot more about them in the lore coming soon. But with that, one more time, let's go over to Doug, who's going to tell us a bit about how the Clampets play.
The Clampets are the fisher folk, or the fishermen of the bayou. They're the new keyword that came out in Malifaux Burns. and it was actually the keyword that Danger Planet was given as a preview. So I'm intimately familiar with these guys. I also play them and have brought them to a couple tournaments. They're really, really strong. They're a marker-based crew. A lot of what they do revolves around an ability called Chum the Waters, which basically says that the model is unaffected by tide markers, and while in base contact with a tide marker, it receives a native plus flip to all defensive duels. And tide markers are these 30 millimeter markers that a bunch of the abilities on both the Clampets and things within the Clampets keyword generates. The first version of the Clampets, or the Clampets Fisher Folk, are stealthed, which is really strong. Whenever you see a master with stealth, it's pretty interesting for me. And they have a leap. And then other than that, they've got a super, super versatile melee attack that you can choose what you want to use it against, either defense, move, or willpower. And it has a whirlpool trigger on it to reposition tons of stuff around it. Then the title version, which it's the Clampets Ballyho Bucket, it plays a bit different. They still do really care about tide markers, but probably even more so in this version. This version has your tide markers also acting as not only are they, it says drop at the beginning of the game, drop 3 severe tide markers anywhere on the center line, at least 2 away from the other marker. Additionally, for this entire encounter, tide markers gain the concealing trait, even if this model is killed. So on top of being normally severe tide markers, they also gain the concealing trait, which allows you to set them up as one-sided defensive tokens, because your friendly models with Chum the Waters are going to be ignoring that concealing trait. So it allows you to really easily set up marker-based scoring schemes. It allows you to set up defensive bubbles against shooting. The other big thing here is that they've got a really strong min 3 stat 6 attack on their Caught in the Motor. You just bash people in the head with it. They've got armor at +2, so it makes them really durable. Unless your opponent is coming in with a cheeky way to get around armor, they're pretty hard to take down. And then they have Oh No Ogopogo, which is a stat 7 mini kidnap, which doesn't really require all that much to set up and can be really powerful. And that's mostly what these guys are doing from a playability standpoint. The Angler keyword in general is super versatile. They've got a lot of different stuff going on. I kind of see them as like a pocket knife or a pocket tool in terms of they can almost do anything in terms of what they have access to in models and scheme pools that they can play into. So I really like these guys. They're probably my current favorite keyword in the Bayou.
So hopefully that's helped you pick out a master that you might like to play for the Bayou. There's a lot of really fun characters and some crazy stuff going on in Bayou, so it can definitely be a difficult decision to make. But hopefully now you've at least narrowed it down to a few that you really like. I want to give a huge thank you to Maeve from the Bayou Breakdown for contributing to the video. Don't forget to check out our podcast. It'll be linked in the description as well. And thanks to Doug from the Danger Planet for all the gameplay breakdowns. Don't forget to check out his channel for more Malifaux gameplay. That'll also be linked in the description. I also want to thank everybody who sent in pictures of their own painted crews for the video. If you want to send in your own pictures for upcoming episodes, then you can send them to this email address. And finally, I want to give a huge thank you to the Extremely Cool Kids tier on Patreon, the Steam Powered Scoundrels, Dogmatized, and Biclops Gladiator Games, and thanks for watching.